Think about the language we use for anger. You don't choose angry. You don't do angry. You get angry. You become enraged. The same way you get sick or become ill, it's something that happens to you. Your body starts the whole process, and then at some point, maybe seconds later, maybe longer, you notice, oh, I'm angry. That delay, that's how the system actually works. Deep inside your brain, roughly behind each ear, sit two small almond-shaped clusters of neurons called the amygdala. Their job is, in very broad terms, threat detection, and they are fast. When something registers as a threat, someone cuts you off in traffic, or a coworker takes credit for your work, or your kid throws their dinner on the floor again, your amygdala fires before the information even reaches the parts of your brain responsible for rational thought. We're talking milliseconds. The amygdala sends an emergency signal to the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus does what any good command center does during a crisis. It hits the alarm. Your sympathetic nervous system kicks in. That's the fight or flight branch. Here's what happens, roughly in order. Your adrenal glands dump adrenaline and cortisol into your bloodstream. Your heart rate climbs. Your blood pressure rises. Blood flow gets rerouted away from your digestive systems toward your big muscle groups. Your breathing speeds up and gets shallower. All your muscles tense. All of this happens before you've had a single conscious thought about being angry. Your body is literally preparing to fight. That's what anger is at a physiological level. It's your body's preparation for a physical confrontation. The fact that the threat is usually an email or something doesn't really matter. The hardware is ancient. The software updates have been slower. Here's where it gets interesting. The part of your brain that you probably think of as you, the reasoning, decision-making, planning part, that's your prefrontal cortex, right behind your forehead. It's the newest part of the brain, evolutionarily speaking. It's what lets you weigh consequences, consider other people's perspectives, and choose not to throw your laptop across the room. But during that initial surge of anger, blood flow to the prefrontal cortex actually decreases. That very part of your brain you need most in that moment is getting fewer resources, not more. And this is why you've said things in anger that you'd never say with 5 more seconds of thought. It's why road rage feels so automatic. The thinking brain is temporarily running on a lower setting while the alarm system runs the show. That conscious moment, I'm angry, usually arrives once the prefrontal cortex starts catching up. You notice the anger. You feel the clenched jaw, the tightness in your chest, the heat rising, but by then the chemical cascade is well underway. The neuroanatomist Jill Bolt Taylor popularized a useful observation, which is that the initial chemical surge of an emotion lasts about 90 seconds. That's it. Adrenaline in, adrenaline processed, adrenaline out. After that, if you're still angry, that's because your thinking brain has gotten involved. Replaying the situation, nursing the grievance, constructing arguments. The amygdala lit a match. Your prefrontal cortex is the one deciding whether to keep feeding it fuel. Which brings up a question. What do you do with all this? For decades, the popular advice was some version of, don't be angry, or calm down, as if you could just override the system with willpower. And look, suppression feels like the mature option. You push it down, you keep a straight face, you move on. But more recent studies, particularly in the field of emotional regulation, have shown that suppression doesn't actually reduce the physiological response. Your heart is still pounding. Your cortisol is still elevated. You've just stopped the expression. You haven't stopped the experience. And over time, chronic suppression is linked to higher blood pressure, weakened immune response, and, ironically, more intense emotional outbursts when the lid eventually comes off. You've probably seen this play out. Maybe this has been you, the person who never gets angry until they really get angry. The neuroscience points toward a different approach. Researchers call it cognitive reappraisal, but in plain terms it means changing the story rather than silencing the feeling. The anger still happens, the amygdala still fires, but once the prefrontal cortex comes online, you use it, not to suppress the emotion, but to re-examine the trigger. They cut me off because they're a terrible driver becomes maybe they just didn't see me. The shift doesn't just feel different, it measurably changes the physiological response. Heart rate drops faster, cortisol clears sooner. And the other thing is that simply naming the emotion helps. Brain imaging studies show that putting a label on what you're feeling, literally saying, "I'm angry," or even just thinking it, reduces amygdala activity. It's called affect labeling, and it works partly because it activates the prefrontal cortex, which in turn puts a gentle brake on the alarm system. So the moment you notice you're angry, that moment of conscious awareness that comes after the body has already reacted turns out to be the most important moment of the whole process. Not because you can undo anger, but because that's where the thinking brain comes back online and you get a choice. Anger isn't a character flaw. It's a threat response system that evolved to keep you alive. It's fast, it's automatic, and it gets first dibs on your brain's resources. You can't stop it from starting, and pretending that it isn't happening just makes the whole thing last longer and cost more. But you can learn to notice it sooner, and that noticing, in the little gap between the amygdala's alarm and the prefrontal cortex response, you get something that feels like agency. Hi, I'm Ben, and I make neuroscience videos about the brain. I had brain cancer myself a number of years ago, and it's made me constantly interested in what's going on up here and how to tell other people about it. So if you enjoyed this video, follow along for more. There's a lot more coming. I'm a new YouTube creator, and I've loved making these so far. So like and subscribe.